Hi, I'm Mike Moscolo. I want to talk to you today about how you can inspire, motivate, and train the next generation of leaders, those leaders who are going to be distributing Red Bull to the city. If you want to inspire someone, give them the capacity to make contributions to something that they want to be part of. And the way you can do that is by cultivating what I would call a continuously developing organization. A continuously developing organization is simply one that is constantly looking for self-improvement, constantly has built right into it the mechanisms and processes for reflecting upon itself, monitoring itself, and making itself better. How can this be done? Well, let me ask a question. Is your organization a machine? Or is your organization an organism? Most organizations are machines. And what do I mean by that? Well, they look like this. What you've got is an organizational chart where you have the boss on the top and you have people underneath that person, and it looks something like this. Now, why would I call that a machine? Well, like a machine, this organizational chart is made up of parts. And the parts are independent of each other. Each part, each person, each role is fixed. They just do one thing over and over and over again, and this whole thing doesn't develop. It is static. It doesn't change. The orders come from the top, if you will, go to the bottom, and what a leader does is a leader tries to make things run efficiency. I make the decisions, or the upper management makes the decisions, and they make sure that the people below them carry them out in the most efficient way. A machine can be efficient, but a machine doesn't develop. Not like an organism. An organism develops. What's an organism? An organism is a system. It's a system that's made up of many, many other systems that work together toward a common goal. And not only do they work together for a common goal, as they do that, the system is constantly evaluating itself and adapting to new circumstances. Okay? That's what an organism does. An organism is constantly getting feedback from its environment and adapting itself and changing itself to shifting circumstances. That's what a continuously developing organism or a continuously developing organization ought to look like. Now, how do you do this? How does a continuously developing organism look different from a machine? Well, what's the role of a leader in both of these organizations? Here, a leader calls the shots. A leader comes up with the ideas are the lifeblood of any organization, and then makes sure that those ideas are executed. Here, a leader is very different. What a leader does here is a leader mobilizes. The leader mobilizes the systems and the people to work together toward a common goal. The leader organizes, brings people together, brings processes together. How? Well, in a cycle, in a system. How does it happen? Well, you start off with a goal. The goal is to create some type of a vision, some type of a shared vision, a vision that's shared amongst the people in the organization. Once a leader's able to do that, when a problem comes up in the organization, what happens is the leader is able to mobilize people, bring them together to collaborate and solve problems. When that happens, what happens? You put those solutions into practice and you monitor those solutions. And as you monitor them, see whether or not you need to revise them if they're working or if they're not working. Now look at the difference between these two. This is a fixed structure. This is a cycle that's constantly moving, constantly bringing people together. And once it does, it cycles through and moves forward and continuously evolves and develops over time. That's a continuously developing organization. continuously developing organization. Now let me give you an example. Let me give you an example of how problems get solved differently in a mechanistic organization versus in a continuously developing organization. So let's take an example. Let's say that the drivers are complaining that their customers are being rude. Okay? You're getting reports from the drivers that when they deliver the Red Bull product that the merchants are not treating them well. Well, if you're in a machine, if you're in a mechanistic organization, well, you've got the drivers on the bottom and the leaders on the top. What may happen is the leader might try to solve the problem by himself or herself and do so right off the cuff. So the idea is, wait a minute, something like the drivers are complaining about rude customers. It's the job of the drivers to be courteous to their customers no matter what those customers do. Doesn't matter whether they're rude or not. Drivers, you gotta be courteous. So you send out a missive, maybe a memo that says all drivers have to be courteous no matter what. Problem solved, or maybe not. Here the idea is that the problem gets solved from the top down, and then we get feedback up to see whether or not the problem has indeed been solved. What would a continuously developing organization do? Well, very different. Well, we start off again with our shared vision. What's our shared vision? Well, we want to get the Red Bull to the city and have the customers be satisfied, make sure it's there on time, it's the right order. And so if there's a problem, here's the problem that the customers are being rude, well, what does the leader do but try to identify the needs of all stakeholders? Because that's what a business does. Any business, any organization is in the business of meeting needs, meeting their customers' needs, their clients' needs, their employees' needs, their colleagues' needs, etc., etc., etc. All those needs have to be met at once. So if there's a problem, what the leader does of a continuously developing organization is gets those stakeholders together, brings people together, brings systems together, and for the purpose of collaborative problem solving, tries to identify what everybody's needs are. Say you go out, you go to the customers, you ask them questions, you bring them together perhaps with the drivers, with the managers or what have you. And you ask questions, and let's pretend you find that, for example, that the customers are upset because when the drivers come in, the trucks are really noisy and loud and they exhibit a lot, they have a lot of fumes or something like that. Well, if that's true, the solution to the problem is not necessarily to have the drivers be courteous, although they need to do that anyway, but it's to fix the trucks. So we fix the trucks and we put that into practice. We monitor the solution. We see whether or not it's working. If it is working, we keep it. If it's not, we revise it. And then we keep going. Maybe the revision of this problem, the solving of this problem changes the vision. And if it changes the vision, now we have a new vision that's going to beginning to go into another cycle and another cycle. The vision changes. You get better practices over time by bringing people together in a continuously developing organization. Now, in such an organization, what's the role of the leaders? Well, the leaders are there not necessarily to call the shots, and they certainly have to make decisions and mobilize ideas, because ideas are the lifeblood of an organization. What the leaders need to have is one most important knowledge base. It's not necessarily economic knowledge, financial knowledge, not necessarily about even the product or anything like that. The most important knowledge of a leader is people knowledge. How to mobilize people. If the leader is there to mobilize people for the purpose of solving problems, that leader needs to know how to bring people together, attend to their needs, promote development in them, so you can promote development in the organization, and so that you can promote development in your product. So, people knowledge, like what? One of the most important pieces of people knowledge, the very first one, is to put needs over strategies. And by that I mean, if you're going to solve a problem, you have to know what the problem is. You have to know what everyone's needs are. What were the needs of the drivers? If the drivers are feeling disrespected, they're not going to do very well on the route. What are the needs of the customers? If the customers are finding things to be too noisy, they're not going to be too happy. You identify the needs, and once you identify needs, and only then, do you begin to talk about strategies for meeting those needs and solving those problems. A good leader addresses needs first before strategies. A good leader also gives people hope. And how do you give people hope? Well, in a continuously developing organization, the hope is built right in. We're constantly developing. We're constantly moving forward. My supervisor, my leader, is constantly trying to find ways to get me involved, to reflect, to become better and better at what I do, and maybe have a future that in the organization that's going to be different than what I have now. Real important in a continuously developing organization is to create a climate of safety where mistakes and weaknesses are not so much punished, but actually encouraged. You don't encourage mistakes. You encourage people to come forward with their weaknesses and their challenges, and to know that they're not going to be penalized for that, but instead they're going to be supported for it. That if you're strong in A, B, and C, but not D, maybe the other employee who's strong in D does D while you do your thing that's strong. That's good. And as a result, you build on people's strengths, their passions. And when that happens, of course, what we're doing is we're leading with emotion. We lead with emotion rather than instruction, rather than orders, rather than convincing. If you seek to meet the needs of your employee, if you seek to meet the needs of your colleague, they're going to want to give more freely to you and to the organization. You improve those practices and you get a much better organism, a much better whole, a much better organization. I'd like the opportunity to explore this with you more detail, and I hope that we will be able to have a conversation.